Well, greetings, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. It's a beautiful day. I'd like to do a class today, a little lesson on the topic of Velcro. And you probably wonder what that's going to be about, so let's wait and see. But anyway, the other day, I was digging through some boxes down in my basement, in a distant corner of the basement, and it was a treasure trove, I swear, of boxes and stuff that used to be kind of important to me. I found some 8-track tapes from my high school days. I found some cassettes from my college days. And then I found some compact disc CDs from my seemingly not too long ago, and I still have a bunch on hand. But it's still long enough to be kind of dated technology, according to my sons. But I also found a CD player I used to have while deployed to Afghanistan, but it doesn't work anymore. But you never know, so I kept it. So I've got all this old technology in here that I used to have. You know, as I look at that stuff in the box, and I think about all the times I've had that down to the time in my life of different things that seemed appropriate at the time, but somehow they just kind of outgrown themselves and new inventions and new things going on. But I kind of thought about this, and everything has an era or a lifespan. Everything's got a lifespan. Ideas, technologies, cultural practices, or nations have a lifespan, or scientific theories have a lifespan, belief systems, and catchphrases such as, that's cool. Remember that phrase? Or I dig it. That's a while back. Or a butter and egg man. You ever seen one of those before? Or even, don't sell me the dog, or sell me a dog, which is a phrase for being conned. So the longevity of any given thing varies tremendously. Compared like the hula hoop era that was so prevalent, it seemed like it's going to last forever, but it was a very short one. You compare that to the Roman Empire from 31 BC to 476 AD, and the hula hoop era is not a long time. Or the 35 millimeter camera, which was very prevalent from 1913 to 2006. Or even the Gunsmoke television show from 55 to 75. Some things last longer than other things, and there's a reason for it. So I want to take that idea. We're going to move into a really interesting Bible lesson about this. So during the lifetime of any given thing, it's often not clear where it is in the lifetime where you are. If you saw some Shakespearean play in London in 1593, you have never guessed that they'd still be in production 400 years later, even though you recognize them as really good, maybe. Or in 1986, when you read a Time magazine article about the Soviet Union, you have never guessed that 6 years later, there would not even be a Soviet Union. It's outstanding, but you don't know in your lifetime what things are relative that are of value and that will last. So the best indication of how long something might exist is how long it has already existed. If an idea or technology has survived for, say, 20 or 10 generations, there's evidently something about it that's resistant to change or being obsolete or even generational gaps. It hangs in there for some reason. Something about it sustains itself even as if everything around it comes and goes. It seems to be stationary in time. Now, the humble knife, let's take an example. The humble knife is a very good example. It's an edged tool for cutting tough materials apart, and is just as useful in this century, the 21st, at home to a kitchen, for example, chef, as it was to a nomadic hunter 100,000 years ago. It's just evolved and changed in the durability of the blade and the way it looks versus a piece of stone, but it's still, the knife is prevalent even to today. It's long past the knife suggests that it will have a really long future because I guess it'll never go away. We don't know it'll ever go away. In other words, we're probably not living in the last few years of the end of the knife. Probably will go right past our lifetime. Now, by the same token, something that has become just a thing is less likely to be a long-lasting thing. If everyone around you is suddenly watching this rapid-fire videos on TikTok, what are the odds that we'll in a few years at the end, or maybe a 1,000-year TikTok era? I don't know. A name for this phenomenon, I call it the Velcro Effect. As a general rule, the older something is, the longer it can be expected to survive or stick into the future. Now, there are exceptions to the Velcro Effect, and the rules applies only to non-perishable things that don't have a natural cycle. I am unlikely to live another 70 plus years, although my ideas or these lessons maybe or something, whatever else I've done, my writings may survive for another 70 years past my time. So there are non-perishable things that could happen. Imperfect as it is, the Velcro effect offers a very useful heuristic for determining what's likely to stick around if we use it as a kind of a testing board, and implies that there are reasons behind the longevity, which may not be very obvious to us. If it's a part of culture, perhaps it fills a human need nothing else can quite do, like music and dancing are Velcro. There's always be type of music or dancing of some sort, as are religion and sports and medicines and painting and sculptures. Those things have a Velcro effect. The wider the range of past conditions something has already survived, then the broader the range of possible future conditions is likely suitable for. So the past of it, of how it is applied in our lives, of how we have used it down through time for people, let's say lifetime of generation after generation, the more susceptible it's going to go for more generations past us. So it's important to note that something being the Velcro only suggests that there's a reason it continues to exist. There's got to be a reason. And it doesn't mean it's good in the moral sense. I mean, alcoholism is a Velcro, is a bad thing. War and the ugliness of that is a Velcro. It's happened throughout life. It'll happen again, over and over again, while we live on this earth. Now, a new book might debut on the bestseller list and garner wild praise. But the real test of its greatness is how long it garners praise. Velcro points to James Joyce and Socrates, not Harry Potter or the Harlequin romance. They won't stick around. Even more strongly, Velcro points to the Stoics, the Bible, and other great writings that have continued to shape mankind, and what it says is going to continue generation after generation, not Harry Potter. For example, the necktie that men wear as a standard business dress is somewhat Velcro. It might be here in 100 years, but probably not for another 500 years. It'll probably go away for some new kind of fad. Christianity isn't likely to go away in the next century. Now, Scientology, quite possibly. It's a fad. Claude Monet, Leonardo da Vinci might be well known in 200 years, but a guy named Andy Warhol, most unlikely, he'll fade from any memory whatsoever. Some things can be so prominent at a given moment in history that they seem like they'll be here forever. It's so unbelievable. Yet they're not Velcro. They don't stick. The internet is not a Velcro. Right now, it's a huge part of our life and culture, but only a generation ago, it was just a promising curiosity. And 2 generations ago, it was an obscure technology, known only to a handful of tech nerds. It's possible that we're at the beginning of a 1,000-year internet era, But I think it's more likely that it will morph into something completely different over the next decade or two, as it already has been since the blog launched 15 years ago, for example. Social media already seems past its peak, and things are going to temper off to something totally different. Yet the Velcro effect gives us a halfway reliable instrument for predicting which parts that now might remain in 100 or 1,000 years, and which parts future people will probably get rid of, jettison out of their life. But I bet those long walks, vegetable gardens, and gathering around the fireplaces will remain like a Velcro forever, because humans need that. So Velcro-ness is a gentle suggestion to us, and you're wondering, where am I going with this, Ray? Where are you going with this? It's a gentle reminder to all of us to zoom out and look beyond today's most prominent, attention-grabbing ideas or books, diversions and hobbies and beliefs, and instead take a very implicit advice from a diverse range of people who lived and will live outside the weather of our current moment, and start listening to people who really count. So what does really count in our life today with all these things going around us and all the technology that's gone so fast, and it comes and it goes? Look at our generations of how much change has happened. My sons tell me all the time, says, Dad, Mom lived through a great generation. You all have gone through so much change. And I believe it. I believe it. All the way from a phone, you just pick it up and talk to the operator, says, give me 935, all the way to now we have cell phones that are more powerful than some of our earlier astronauts had. So what does count anymore? What will stick like Velcro for all time? And what can we depend on in our life? I noticed a church one day had a very simple concept in their brand new sign outside their church. It's been around for a while, and it was most likely borrowed from one of the many books about churches. But this is what they said on the sign: love God, love people, serve the world. Pretty simple, isn't it? When you think about it, that's a very simple message to Christians, not to the lost people, those who are searching, but to Christians that God gives to us. Jesus was asked which commands was most important, and he told us that we should love God, and the second is like it: love others, he said. He also reminded us that whatsoever we do for one of the least brothers and sisters of his, we have done for him. Now that has lasted, is lasting, and always will last according to the Velcro effect, because it's going to keep going on because it's such a powerful part of our lives. I came across a psalm that I think tells the same story, and I want to share this with you. Psalm 62, 9 through 12. Let me read it to you. Low-born men are but a breath. The high-born are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion or take pride in stolen goods, though your riches increase. Do not set your heart on them. One thing God has spoken. Two things have I heard, that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O Lord, are loving. Surely you will reward each person according to what he has done. So the psalmist here shows us that it does not matter to what circumstances we're born into, whether it be a high, rich family or lots of money and influence, or a very low-income family that's struggling to get by day, and we are nothing in comparison to God. Nothing. Makes no difference. Here today, gone tomorrow. When you look at the fact that we will live forever, and all of us will, just not here on earth. When in comparison to forever is 60, 70, 80, or 100 years, compare those two eras, those lifespans that we just talked about. So you say, wow, grandma or grandfather or whatever, brother, sister, you've lived a long time. You're 80 years old, you're 90, you're 70, whatever it may be. That's a lot. That seems like eternity for a young person when they hear about it. But when you hear it in comparison to forever and eternity with God, it's relative, is it not? We are but a vapor in the wind, here today, gone tomorrow. But our God is everything and always. There is no such thing as Velcro in his life. There was a minister named Russ Blowers who once asked to speak at a Rotary Club about his profession. Now, he wanted to say more than I'm just a preacher. He knew that would not go over real well, and so he tried to rephrase what his job was. And this is what he said. Hi, I'm Russ Blowers. I'm with Global Enterprise. We have branches in every country in the world. We have representatives in nearly every parliament and boardroom on earth. We're into motivation and behavior alteration. We run hospitals, feeding stations, crisis, pregnancy centers, universities, publishing houses, and nursing homes. We care for clients from birth to death. We're not into life insurance and fire insurance. We perform spiritual heart transplants. I like that. Our original organizer, all caps there, owns all the real estate on Earth plus an assortment of galaxies and constellations. He knows everything and lives everywhere. Our product is free for the asking. There is not enough money to buy it. Our CEO was born in a hick town, worked as a carpenter, didn't own a home, was misunderstood by his family, and hated by his enemies. Walked on water, was condemned to death without trial, and arose from the dead. I talk with him every day. Isn't that a great job description? I love that. We can almost put ourselves in that as Christians. Now, the second thing the psalmist said in the verse I read earlier, it talks about treasures on earth. Do not trust in extortion or take pride in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. So in other words, don't look for eternal security in financial matters or health or other people, because once again, we are nothing without God. So many people set their heart on their wealth or material possessions and their investments and their savings account or wherever it may be, or great accomplishments that we have done, unwilling to give them up for what God wants to do with our lives. We started speaking of how simply it really is. And folks, the fact that we're nothing without our God. All we have come from him. And he wants to give us so much more if we're willing to give up what we think we have for what he wants to do with us. That's the bottom line. So the question to all of us here is, what are we hanging on to? Are we storing up treasures here on earth? The treasures that not only can be ruined by the things of the world, but treasure that you cannot take away when you want to leave this world. It's going to stay right here. Matthew 6:19 says this, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Powerful. We know that verse so well. Is it really that simple? Yes. Love God, love people, and serve the world. It's really a matter of priority. If we see that everything we do in this world will determine what we will have in eternity, then we might live life here on earth, which really is just a vapor in the wind. We might just live it a little differently if we know that. If we believe the word, if we understand the concept of God has given us, that we are here to love him, love others, and then serve, we have all the treasures we could ever imagine. But I think most don't believe that, which they do in a blink of an eye will determine forever. It's a concept that is difficult to wrap our minds around, but that's what God tells us all the time. Once again, one thing God has spoken, it says in Psalms, two things have I heard, that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O Lord, are loving. Surely You'll reward each person according to what they've done. God is loving. God is strong. He moves in ways that we can never understand. I came across a powerful story I want to relate to you that happened to this man, Tony Campolo. A great author, by the way, if you want to read some of his books. And he talks about a time when he was invited to a Pentecostal college to be a speaker. Now, before the service, 8 men came up and had him kneel at the front so they could place their hands on his head and pray for him, which is very traditional in the Pentecostal church. Tony was very glad to have the prayer, but each of them prayed a long time. And the longer they prayed, the more they pushed on Tony's head. And then they even seemed to wander in their prayers. One of the men didn't even pray for Tony. He prayed for some guy that he was concerned about. He began to pray and said this. This is what the guy prayed when he had his hand on Tony's head. Dear Lord, you know Charles Stolfitz. He lives in that silver trailer down the road a mile. You know the trailer, Lord, just down the road on the right-hand side. So Tony, when he's there listening to this, wanted to interrupt and tell him that God already knew where the guy lived and he didn't need directions. But he just knelt there trying to keep his head upright as they pressed down on it. And then the prayer went on again. Lord, Charlie told me this morning he's going to leave his wife and 3 kids. Step in and do something, God. Bring that family back together. And with that, the prayer time's ended. And then Tony got up and went on to preach at that college chapel where he was invited. So things went pretty well, and he got in the car, Tony did, and began to drive home. As he drove into the Pennsylvania Turnpike, he saw a hitchhiker and felt compelled to pick him up. No one can tell a story better than Tony Campolo, so I'll let him take it from here as I just quote from him, from his book. He said, we drove, this hitchhiker and him, a few minutes, and I said, hi, my name is Tony Campolo. What's yours? He said, my name is Charlie Stolfitz. I couldn't believe it. And I got off the turnpike and the next exit and headed back. He got a bit uneasy with that, and after a few minutes he said, hey, mister, where are you taking me? I said, I'm taking you home. He narrowed his eyes and asked, why? And I said, because you just left your wife and 3 kids, right? Well, that blew him away. Yeah, that's right. With shock all over his face, he plastered himself against the car door and never took his eyes off me. Then I really did him in, and I drove him right to his silver trailer. And when I pulled up, his eyes seemed to bulge as he asked, how did you know that I lived here? And I said, God told me. And he said, I believe God did tell me. When he opened the trailer door of his wife, exclaimed, you're back, you're back. He whispered in her ear, and the more he talked, the bigger her eyes got. I said with real authority, the 2 of you sit down. I'm going to talk to you, and the 2 of you are going to listen. And man, did they listen. That afternoon, I led those 2 young people to Jesus Christ. Somebody prayed a believing prayer of faith, which moves the hand of God. The Bible says from Hebrews, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. So later on, the writer says this in Hebrews, and without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Isn't that a wonderful story? A miraculous story of God using Tony at the right moment, at the right time, to save a marriage and save their very souls. So if you remember, I told you that the only thing that counts for all time is that faith expressed through love. And the Bible tells us, the psalmist tells us that God is loving and strong and that he'll reward us according to what we have done. So I ask you this morning, how much longer simpler can it get? Love God, love people, and serve the world. Faith showing itself through love. The test will come, and we are asked to serve in ways that can be very uncomfortable for us. in ways that we would like to pass it up and let somebody else do it, like Moses said to God when he was to lead the Israelites. Not all the people we encounter will be the kind of people we want to associate with, let alone serve. They're dirty, they're nasty, they talk bad, all kind of things. There are some that are so attractive to us, and yet there are those ones that God asks us to serve. The sick, the lonely, the unattractive as well. And he will reward each one according to what we have done. Now I want to finish off with this beautiful story of our lesson here. Listen carefully to it. It's a great story. It talks all about the Velcro effect. John Blanchard stood up from the bench, straightened his army uniform, and studied the crowd of people making their way through Grand Central Station. He looked for the girl whose heart he knew, but whose face he didn't. The girl with the rose. His interest in her had been 13 months before in a Florida library. Taking a book off a shelf, he found himself intrigued not with the words of the book, but with a note penciled in the margin. The soft handwriting reflected a thoughtful soul and an insightful mind. In the front of the book, he discovered that the previous owner of the book was Miss Holly Maynell. Miss Hollis Maynell. So with time and effort, he located her address. She lived in New York City. He wrote her a letter introducing himself and inviting her to correspond. The next day, he was shipped overseas for service in World War II. And during the next year and 1 month, the two grew to know each other through the mail. Each letter was a seed falling on a very fertile heart. A romance was budding. So, Blanchard requested a photograph, but she refused. She felt that if he really cared, it wouldn't matter what she looked like. When the day finally came for him to return from Europe, they scheduled their first meeting at 7 p.m. at the Grand Central Station in New York. She said, as she wrote to him, "You'll recognize me by the red rose I'll be wearing on my lapel." I'll let Mr. Blanchard tell you what happened, and as I quote the rest of the story from him. Okay, it's a wonderful story. So he's now at the Grand Central Station to meet this unknown girl. He had no idea what she looked like, but had fallen in love in a budding romance by just her letters. He said, "A young woman was coming toward me, her figure long and slim. Her blonde hair lay back in curls from her delicate ears. Her eyes were blue as flowers. Her lips and chin had a genuine, gentle firmness, and in her pale green suit she was like the springtime come alive. I started toward her, entirely forgetting to notice that she was not wearing a rose. As I moved, a small, provocative smile curved her lips. 'Going my way, sailor?' she murmured. Almost uncontrollably, I made one step closer to her, and then I saw Hollis Maynell. She was standing almost directly behind the girl. A woman well past 40. She had graying hair tucked under a worn hat. She was more than a plump, her thick ankle feet thrust into low-heeled shoes. The girl in the green suit was walking quickly away. I felt as though I was split in two. So keen was my desire to follow her, and yet so deep was my longing for the woman whose spirit had truly companioned me and upheld my own. And there she stood. Her pale, plump face was gentle and sensible. Her gray eyes had a warm and kindly twinkle. I did not hesitate. My fingers gripped the small, worn blue leather copy of the book that was to identify me to her. This would not be love, but it'd be something precious. Something perhaps even better than love, a friendship for which I had been and must ever be grateful for. I squared my shoulders. My hand gripped the book, and I started forward, and I saluted and held the book out to the woman, even though while I spoke, I felt choked a little bit by the bitterness of my disappointment. "I'm Lieutenant John Blanchard, and you must be Miss Maynell. I am so glad to meet you. May I ask you for dinner?" The woman's face broadened into a tolerant smile. "I don't know what this is all about, son," she answered, "but the young lady in the green suit who just went by, she begged me to wear this rose on my coat, and she said if you were to ask me out for dinner, I should go and tell you that she is waiting for you in the big restaurant across the street. She said it was some kind of a test." Now, isn't that a great story? It's not difficult to understand and admire Miss Maynell's wisdom. The true nature of a heart is seen in the response to the unattractive. As one songwriter said, "Tell me whom you love, and I will tell you who you are." The one thing that counts is faith showing itself through love. Love God, love people, serve the world. Now that's the Velcro effect test that will last for always, that you can depend on. It's not a fad. The Lord bless you today. It's nice being with you. God bless you.